Welcome to my first ever book blog, and I shall start things off by talking about Killing Floor by Lee Child. This was the first ever Jack Reacher novel, and I'm going to start by reading you a quick but memorable passage. The thin sheet of paper fed itself out, covered in writing. Then the machine stopped and went quiet. I picked up the paper and glanced at it. Then I read it through twice. I went cold. I was gripped by an icy paralysis and I couldn't move. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing on that piece of fax paper. The sky crashed in on me. I stared at the doctor and spoke. He grew up abroad, I said. He had his teeth fixed wherever he was living. He broke his right arm when he was 8 and had it set in Germany. He had his tonsils out in the hospital in Seoul. The doctor looked up at me. They can tell all that from his fingerprints, he said. I shook my head. That guy was my brother. So let's get to the nitty-gritty of Jack Reacher number 1. A lonesome wanderer, Jack Reacher, gets off a Greyhound bus in a dusty old town in the American South, hoping to research the life and times of a late Delta blues guitarist. Before he can do any digging, he's arrested for a murder he couldn't possibly have committed, and pretty soon Reacher finds himself getting in the face of a scholarly yet impatient police detective called Finley. A resident of the town confesses to the murder, but Reacher is still soon and somewhat mysteriously taken to the lifers wing of a maximum security prison. In prison, he survives an attempt on his and the other so-called murderer's life. At Finley's request, Reacher is released from prison and Reacher agrees to help Finley investigate the murder, and they are assisted by a female police officer called Roscoe. Another body shows up, and it's Jack Reacher's brother, and you could say this is where it gets serious. Reacher, Roscoe and Finley find themselves working to uncover a nationwide counterfeiting ring, headed up by a man named Kleiner, who has most of the town in his back pocket, including the sheriff and the local mayor. Reacher, Roscoe and Finley soon find themselves involved in a rather graphic battle for survival, involving fisticuffs, guns, and at least one big explosion. Okay, what I liked best about Killing Floor was the dialogue. I especially enjoyed the often heated exchanges between Reacher and Finley. You've got a classic case of the irresistible force up against an immovable object, and that never fails to keep me interested. In fact, this odd couple pairing did put me in mind of certain 80s cop/buddy movies. Think Lethal Weapon, think 48 Hours, think Beverly Hills Cop, where you have people thrown together reluctantly. They have to work together, but they don't get along. They appear to be poles apart, but they soon learn they're not as different as they thought, and they come to recognise each other's talents, and of course they learn to combine their skills to form an effective team, and it's always a pleasure to see that happen. Speaking of the 80s, I do have to say that much of the deep South imagery in Killing Floor, by that I mean prison buses leaving trails of dust, state penitentiaries with high wire fences guarded by cops in blue uniforms, corrupt sheriffs in the American South. In my mind's eye, it reminded me of The Dukes of Hazzard or Fletch Lives even, which is great if that's your kind of thing. If not, then it may come across as rather cliched at times. Interestingly, early on in the story, Reacher nicknames Finley Harvard Guy on account of his university education, and in doing so, very nearly restarts the age-old academia versus common sense argument. Let's talk about Roscoe, the female police officer. A bit of a wasted opportunity, I felt. Anyone who's seen the third Lethal Weapon movie will know that a feisty female sidekick is a worthy asset in a good buddy drama, but Roscoe doesn't get to do, say, or think a lot. For the most part, she stands around looking pretty. She sometimes shares a bed with Jack Reacher. If it had been me, I'd have been tempted to make her a martial arts expert, or a stunt artist, or perhaps a stunt driver, or escape artist, or something. Something to give it an extra angle. But so yeah, I felt this was something of a wasted opportunity. I wasn't going to say what I was about to say, but I guess I've started and I guess I couldn't help myself. We do have one chapter in which Reacher is in prison and he attempts to pass the time by singing an old blues tune. He sings Further On Up the Road by the late Bobby Bland, he sings to himself, and we are told that he sings it in the key of G major, but then changes his mind and sings it in E flat, hoping this will give it an extra oomph. Well, guys, I know a lot about blues, and trust me, no blues song was ever written, recorded, or performed in the key of E flat. What Lee Child meant was Reacher sang it in E minor. Now, this would give a blues song a darker edge. Now, this is only a minor niggle, but I do have to mention this because I've said for a long time that if an author wants to impress his or her readers with specialist knowledge, then it has to be researched and executed properly, because it may not escape the notice of eagle-eyed readers such as yours truly. Okay, if I was in the business of giving out stars, I think 3 would be stingy, but 4 would be pushing it. It's a good enough yarn, do check it out, and I'm going to finish things off by reading you another standout passage. I promise you'll like this. 1, I counted, no response. 2, I counted, no response. Then I cheated. Instead of counting to 3, I headbutted him full in the face. I must have caved his whole face. I guess I pulped his nose and smashed both his cheekbones. Jarred his little brain around real good. His legs crumpled and he hit the floor like a puppet with the strings cut, like an ox in the slaughterhouse. His skull cracked on the concrete floor. I stared around the knot of men. Who's next? I said. There can't be a man alive who doesn't wish he had a story like that to tell. So guys, thanks for listening, and remember, as well as subscribing, there is a comments box below. I'd be keen to hear how you feel about Killing Floor, and hopefully we can get involved in some merry banter. This is a book club after all. But for the meantime, thanks for listening. Bye for now.